Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking with Wing Twyman and Jen Richmond. Um, Three of us met when a few years back when we were doing some work with Counterweight, and I'm having them on today because they've written a new book called Letters in Black and White, and it's a discussion about race and racism. They were both, as Wing put it, they were both feeling alienated by the new discourse around race and racism. So Jen is the co-founder and director for the Institute for Liberal Values, and Wink is a former law professor, went to Harvard Law, University of Virginia. Hi guys, thanks for coming on.
Hi,
Thank you for
Obey.
having us.
So, I mentioned like I'd like to start with your book because I believe when we first met, you were thinking about it or just started it or something, and so now it's out. And unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it should be arriving next week, so it'll be like my next read.
Oh, cool.
So if you wouldn't mind, just going to just a little introduction and then start talking about the book and how it came about.
Yeah, well, I'll start. So for me, this was as Wink mentioned. I think Obeyed. Live in Austin, Texas. I attended a diversity training here, and going really. This was pre George Floyd, so this is pre some of the kind of more hysteria around DEI than we've seen in the more recent past. But I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to write on race and I'm going to write on polarization, I need to go and find out more about, lives that are not mine. And so Wink knows this. I went there really with a kind of genuine curiosity. And like I've said, so many times, that was the opposite of what I got. And I was so shocked by the affinity groups, by the actual active segregation, that I wrote a piece about it. And really, the rest is history. It went in Aereo magazine. This was when Helen was still running Aereo. And after that published, I received a letter in the mail from a stranger. So Wink and I started out as strangers. We ended up as close of friends as can be, who've written, letter after letter to each other. So I'll leave it from there for Wink to kind of see where he felt the original impetus to write me. But that's how the friendship started.
Oh, thanks.
So when I read Chin's essay in the magazine, I was touched by her disappointment at the use of caricatures and stereotypes based upon race, because I could relate to that so well. I had grown up in a southern suburban small town in Virginia in the 1970s, and I remember that the greatest enemy was caricatures, racial stereotypes. We were raised to always view that as kind of the villain in our lives, and if you could counteract that, then you were making a plus for humanity. But I was also struck at the time by a conversation I had with a young relative. This relative, actually, I think it was April 21st, 2018, before George Floyd, had said, Blackness is oppression. Nothing else matters. And that really caused my head to spin, like the actor in The Exorcist, because I was so opposed to everything I had known and had been trained growing up in the South. And so I was in that mental state when I read Chin's essay, and we began to writing each other out of a sense of profound and mutual alienation from the discourse of race. And that's how we settled upon writing this book eventually.
Okay, well, that's interesting because okay, both your perspectives. So, I think you both know this, but like from my end, it was something similar. Like I was a guy who worked in IT. I was not vocal. I was just going along with my life, and then I came back from working overseas, and you know, with me, it started with the discourse around Islam. It was just completely skewed, and um, you know, I just the things that were I was hearing, like, I got called a white supremacist because I was criticizing the hijab,
Mhm, mhm.
and it was at that point I was like, and this was shortly after I got back. So I got back in February 2014. So this was, within a couple of months. Um, and I just wanted to know where this was coming from. And
Do you
it
know,
just,
do you know Sarah Hader?
yeah, I
I
know Sarah
believe she's
very
in
well. I shouldn't say very well, but I know her. Yeah, because
Yeah, yeah,
I was part of a XM&A, and
okay.
I've met her a few times. Yeah,
Yeah, I was really impressed with how she really hammers home the importance of being a dissident in the Muslim community.
yeah.
That sometimes that's not really supported.
No, but it's just more of, for me. It was just, okay, but I'm brown. Where does the white supremacy come from? So it was like, that to me kind of hit home. Like, as soon as I came back, I knew something was wrong. But then when I heard that, I'm like, okay, this talk around race is just something, like, it's not normal.
Right.
Um, and so, like, that's how I got into any of this. I mean, otherwise, like I said, I would just be plodding along, living my life, and I wouldn't have given a damn. Um,
Exactly. Right.
but
Right. Right.
so, I mean, if we can get into your book, because I'd like to, you know, if you want to talk a bit about that, talk about how, like, what you're covering, and like some of the topics, and maybe like, I might interject a little bit and try to relate it to some of the stuff that's going on, now.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
Well, I think one of the key conditions for the success of the book was my refusal early out to only talk with Jen through slogan words, through the filter of certain pre-approved words or jargon. So, for example, I remember one early correspondence in which Jen attempted to cast herself as white privileged. And I just told her that's not going to work because if we're going to have an authentic, genuine conversation, you can't talk through and use slogan words that are designed to manipulate the emotions and feelings of others. So once we got past that hurdle, I think we really were able to explore an honest discussion about race in great detail. Do you agree with that, Jen?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you though, Obey. So our book is the way we laid out our letters after we sat back and what Wink, it was about 4 years of writing, little 3 years
Yes.
of writing ish, and then some editing. But the editing was very very minimal. What we did was the letters aren't chronological per se, although they are somewhat because our relationship and our conversation evolved. But our first section, our first epistolary, is really on us, Wink and I, getting to know each other. So when I entered into the conversation, as Winker, I said, I entered into it just, fresh after taking this diversity training. Also obeyed, feeling like like the world had turned on its head. Keep in mind, I think, and we've discussed this before, I lived overseas as well for, a good part of my life. So I came back to the US going, well, did I must have missed like a memo somewhere,
Yeah.
when I was overseas. And so as this conversation started, Wink originally had me read this book, which was Slavery as It Was and Is,
American slavery as it is.
as
Yeah.
it is, Thomas Weld. This was written back in the 1800s. It's 1,000 accounts of slavery. It is like in every way detailed and brutal. And when a lot of people talk about slavery, and if they haven't read this book, it's hard to take them seriously because this is like the fundamental book that really details and outlines some of the brutality. And
Amen,
so
Jen.
our original correspondence, I mean, he basically said, I need, before we can really start, we had been writing each other kind of back and forth for a while. And then we said, I think what we're saying is authentic and genuine, and we're pushing back on each other in ways that are like friendly and disagreeable, or disagreeing but not being disagreeable. And so we said, let's, should we write more, and should we write for the public, knowing that this is a discourse that we think is sorely needed. And at that time, that's when he said, okay, but please read this book first from, cover to cover. And I did. And so our first section of the book is about slavery. We take a different tack than, I think, a very different tack than, say, the 1619 Project or a lot of books on slavery. But we do start there. We do start with our history. So Wink, I don't know if you want to take it from there, but that is
Well, I think that was really important because, we didn't run away from history. And sometimes the argument is made that if you refuse to engage in use certain dialogue or jargon,
Right.
you're trying to run away from history. I think with the opposite. I think Jen and I aggressively ran into the history, and that gave us the power to open up and be more authentic. Um, and so, in that first set of letters, we reviewed the atrocities of American slavery, and we also reviewed the lingering impacts of slavery today. I mean, so often people will say, well, because of the lingering effects of slavery, that's why we're in the condition we are in today, and that's why we need reparations for American slavery. I aggressively pushed back against that idea based upon the things I had seen and known and observed. I was in a great position as a co-writer for Jim because I was someone who actually was born in Richmond, Virginia, in the capital of the Confederacy. I lived all of my life within maybe 2 miles of the Jefferson Davis Highway, named after the President of the Confederate States of America. I mean, so I knew of the Southern experience. It wasn't something that I simply read in books. I'm always amused, Obey, when I read accounts of the South by professors at Harvard. I've only been down to, say, the South for a summertime visit. I'm always amused by that. But in any event, so I think that really gave our section on slavery a lot of authenticity. And then the next session of the book, the next set of letters, which I really loved, was a tour through classic examples of Black achievement, of triumph over adversity, of resilience during times of slavery. I mean, that's the thing. People are so quick to just look at slavery, but they oftentimes ignore and do not see that there were always stories of enterprise and accomplishment during those times. And I like some of the stories we select from those times, ranging from Congressman Rainey to Daniel Brown, one of my ancestors, to George LaShawn, to one of the leading pioneer Black lawyers in Memphis, Tennessee. It truly is so. I enjoyed that because so often you don't read about people of achievement who were Black during a time of American slavery. You only read about slaves. And I'll let Jed pick up at this point.
If you don't mind, I just want to like
Yeah,
one thing in that is
sure.
it's something I've always said, or I shouldn't say always, but recently when I started talking about this, is I was okay. Black History Month
Mhm.
for me, it should be that's American history.
mm,
So incorporate that into American history. But in my mind, when you just allocate, the shortest month of the year for Black history, it, what are the kids actually going to learn? Like some of these stories you're talking about, they're not going to learn. So yeah, talk about the bad that happened, talk about the good that happened, talk about you know talk about everything that happened. Okay, obviously, you're limited by time and this whatever, but so when you're talking about the Civil War era or Reconstruction, you can bring in people like Frederick Douglass. You can bring in other people from that. Like, it just that's what I think should be done. Now, so like I'm glad you were doing that.
I so agree. One of the things I'm so excited about is we have a spinoff from the book, that section. Within maybe a week or two, we'll be creating a website, which is an exhibit. And Jen and I had gone to the Victims of Communism Museum in DC last week, and we saw this exhibit, which showed all of these faces of people who were victims of communism. And the caption was, remember us, remember us. And that was it, the only words. And it was so poignant. And it occurred to me, and a friend of Jen's in that moment, we should have something like that for pioneer Black lawyers who are so often forgotten in history classes. So we're working on an exhibit online which will capture pictures of 46 pioneer Black lawyers who lived during slavery, who rebut all of the caricatures and stereotypes you hear about. And each picture will have an attached backstory of that pioneer Black lawyer. That's our small little part that we can do to help expand the abundance of and the richness of Black life during slavery. Yeah, Blackness was more than slavery. Blackness was also enterprise, entrepreneurship, accomplishment, on and on and on. Even in the 1860s, Blackness was more than oppression.
No,
So
that's
just
great.
to put a finer point on what Wink said, we're starting with, because Wink loves Black history, and as a lawyer himself, his particular interest is in Black lawyers. So we've got 46 Black lawyers, but it's just starting there. So the stories will be of the Black lawyers because we've curated that already. But it's the coolest idea in my mind, or in our minds at least, is where you can look at these, like in our book, we write about John Mercer Langston. And to me, in that section 2 of our book, that was one of the most powerful letters Wink ever wrote me. I didn't know about John Mercer Langston before Wink wrote me, but what he did in that letter was he used word cloud analysis.
Mm.
Okay. And so he's looked at John Mercer Langston's word cloud and then compared it vis-a-vis Ta-Nehisi Coates' word cloud. And the words, like John Mercer Langston, back in the days of slavery, never used like these disempowering words that we hear today. All of his words were around enterprise, even when he was actually in the midst of some of the, of true slavery and oppression. And so when Wink wrote me that, he said, let's compare these word clouds. And Wink, I'll let you take it from there because there's some psychology there that I think is really interesting. But that to me
Sure.
was an eye-opening letter
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
where we're not honoring the past. And for me, as a white American, we want to eventually retire from race, but with an American with less melanin, let me put it that way. I look back at history and the history of slavery, and I look at the Black American experience with so much gratitude and just awe. And for us to see Blackness as only oppression erases all of that that's part of this greater American history.
Yeah.
2 points. So one, John Mercer Langston was just an incredible pioneer Black lawyer, born in 1820s, died in the 1890s, I believe. But the point is, he began his 500-page autobiography with a single phrase: self-reliance, the secret of success. I'll repeat that: self-reliance, the secret of success. So here's a man who literally knew authentic, honest to God slaves who nonetheless achieved, and he did not begin his life story of oppression. Nothing else matters. Self-reliance. And then when we looked at the use of the word oppression, I believe Ta-Nehisi Coates, who was born in Baltimore in the 1970s, used the oppression to describe life at nearly half the rate, if not more, than a man born in the 1820s in Virginia, a slave state. That made no sense to me. If anyone should be using the word oppression to describe life in reality, it should be a man who was born on a plantation, not a man who was born in inner city Baltimore in the 1970s. And so that's why I think Jen really was moved by that letter, because it shows the power of words, of word choice. You can choose words of disempowerment, or you can choose words of power in the most dark, bleak times imaginable. So that's what let's not take away from that letter. And I'm glad that Jim was moved by that letter, because I think more people should be aware of how the words we use can manipulate our self psychology and our sense of self in the modern age.
It's interesting, like when you compared him to Coates, because when I was like, I took a huge deep dive into CRT and everything, starting about, like, I'd read some of it earlier, but really got into it and just did nothing but read almost just that starting around 2018. But when I compare Baldwin with Bell, you know, it's the same kind of thing. Like, Baldwin doesn't shy away from bad things, but it's a hopeful message. Whereas Belle is just, I mean, the permanence of racism. I mean, come on, like, and it just reminds me of like Tom Waits. Like, I like the Baldwin because I like beautiful music telling me horrible things. Whereas Belle, it's just horrible. Yeah.
Right,
Hopeless, hopeless.
Yeah.
right. And so then the second part of the book uh, kind of walks into the modern era.
The
And
third part,
I'm going
yeah.
to let Jen talk about this because she had the sense of discovery. I know it only too well. But so often we assume that when we write about Black people, we must be writing about the ghetto or ghetto culture and consciousness. But Jen discovered a different part of Black life, didn't you, Jen? In part
Yes.
two of the book.
So yeah, part two is more where we are at today. And actually, these letters were probably interspersed with our earlier letters with slavery, with some of our letters. So this is where we kind of collected these other letters that are dealing with the here and now into the final third section of the book. But what's interesting, because some of our earlier letters were around Ta-Nehisi Coates, and early in our correspondence, I ended up, this is pre-COVID, ended up going on a mission trip with my church to Baltimore. And I had just recently finished reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' books. And the church trip, we were there on a mission. Had no idea what to expect. But of course, I should not have been surprised when everything was racially stereotyped and caricatured. And so we get there, there with the goal of doing good works, and everything was like, there was this kind of smacked of white saviorism, and then we had to go on racial tours of Baltimore to see. And when we in these tours, and we write about this in the book, in these tours of Baltimore, if we entered into a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured and the streets were clean, it was a white neighborhood. I kid you not. It was a white neighborhood. I mean, literally, that is what the tour guide said. See the nice lawns. Where have we crossed the boundary? Now we're in the white neighborhood. And this is like, again, this is kind of early into our conversation. And I write Wink back that, and he goes, where does this, very ignorant tour guide think Black doctors live? Or Black, it's like, who says that this is because it's manicured? And he was so offended by the fact that manicured and clean meant white. And it's that really opened up our dialogue. And you see part of that happening. That's kind of the real world. That's an example of one of our real world conversations that you find in part three.
I just want to on
Jen.
that right here, like, so that stupid thing the Smithsonian had where, professionalism, punctuality, love of the written word,
Yeah,
blah, 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 all that's whiteness and white. Actually, I
right,
think they said
right.
white supremacy culture. The federal government in Canada, that's what our diplomats are being taught. And our Ministry of Immigration, their definition of white privilege says, regardless of skin color or race, if you uphold ideas of white supremacy, you have white privilege. So if you believe in professionalism, punctuality, love of the written word, objectivity, reason, logic, you are taking on you're upholding white supremacy. So then therefore you have white privilege. So I mean, you're talking about like real world, like this is our diplomats are being taught that, our foreign service is being taught that. This is how our this is how our Department of Immigration is looking at people who have white privilege. Like, I mean, that's insane.
Right, right. So how do we oppose that? How do we bring things back to reality? I mean, one of the things I enjoyed about part two of the book was exposing Jen to Jack and Jill. And Obey, have you ever heard of Jack and Jill? I bet you haven't.
Nope.
Yeah, okay.
I
Jack and
hadn't
Jill,
either.
yeah, Jack and Jill is an association of elite Black moms, which has been around since I think the 1930s. I think it was founded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by Marion Stubbs. The point is, in the 1930s, the wives of Black doctors and lawyers and professionals decided they wanted an appropriate place for their children to meet other playmates. It was during a time of segregation, so there wasn't a lot of interracial contact, but they also wanted to avoid the perhaps counterproductive values and attitudes of lower income Black kids. So Jack and Jill became an oasis in a sense. And over the years, Jack and Jill has developed into a nationwide association, and generations of kids have grown up in this association, and they only know Blackness in terms of their lived experiences as well, is dad a doctor, is dad a lawyer, is mom a doctor, is mom a lawyer, what college are you going to, are you going to, so the question is never, are you going to college, the question is, are you going to Yale, or are you going to Spelman, are you going to Harvard, or are you going to Morehouse? And what gave me great joy was exposing Jen to those realities of Black life one doesn't see in this kind of training that the diplomats in Canada are receiving. How would they make sense of people who are third and fourth generation Jack and Jill, who
I
live
don't know.
by,
Okay,
yeah,
but
it's a
okay,
good question,
so
right?
the so the third party in Canada, the NDP,
Yeah.
uh, their their party leader is a Sikh, you know, and he's spouting the same rhetoric.
Mm.
So it's, what? So is he telling us that he's not professional, that he's not punctual, that he doesn't like the written word? Like, I mean, what is he trying to tell us when he spouts that stuff? And he's
I
not
think he's
white.
telling you, yeah, I think he's telling you one of three things. Number one, he's telling you that he's too afraid to speak the truth. And so he doesn't want to admit that to himself. So he spouts the slogans and propaganda. Number two, he's telling you that he cares more about his self interest than he does reality. Or number three, he's just dumb and ignorant and
Yeah,
out of touch with reality.
yeah,
It's one of those two things, right?
But wait. I
So,
would say with number two, if I'm
mhm,
interpreting what you said, is self-interest. And we've
yeah.
talked about this, and we talk a little bit about it in the book. That, I mean, is this virtue signaling, if you will, part of a power grab, a larger power grab?
Or just self interest.
yeah.
But
But I
Those are
mean,
two different
that's
things,
what
right?
I'm asking you. Or do you think
Yeah.
that's one and the same?
Oh, I
Self-interest,
think
power
they're,
grab. I mean,
I,
power grab
I think,
is self-interest. I mean, we all go
yeah,
there when given the opportunity. I think that's human nature. It's not necessarily a criticism, but
yeah.
it's self-interest.
Yeah, I see them as different because
Okay.
if you want a power grab, then you're going to be more aggressive. You're going to be more woke than the woke person next to you. That's a power grab because
Mm-hmm.
the culture rewards fanaticism in a sense. But if it's about self interest and you recognize that it doesn't really ring true, you're going to do the bare minimum to spout the words so that you at least check off the box, but you don't get into trouble.
Mm.
So I do think there's a difference
Okay.
between the fanatics, right,
Yep. Yeah.
who are going hardcore, those who really are driven by self-interest. What do you think of it?
okay,
That's
well,
good.
so on Singh, I think he's a true believer.
Mhm.
Here's where I stand on some of this stuff. And I saw this a lot in the ex-Muslim community, and I've seen it. And I mean, you saw what happened with atheism, right? I mean, I just started calling a lot of what happened to North American atheism. I say that they became woke evangelicals, and it's just. So I saw it where you're coming in, you see Sam Harris, you see Hitchens, you see Dawkins, whatever. All these people, okay, go to college, believe in the evidence, and if you're coming from fundamentalist backgrounds, for the most part, you're not reading much. There are people like Megan Phelps Roper from the West Baptist Road Church, where her grandfather actually made her read like Mill and Milton, and just said you have to know your enemy, right? Um,
Mhm.
but for the most part, you're not well read. So you come into
Right.
college, like I'm generalizing here. You haven't
Sure.
read a lot of Enlightenment thinkers. You haven't read different thought. You've read the religion, and that's about it. And so you get to college and you've started hearing these people, and if you had doubts or whatever, then you start maybe you take a gender studies course, and okay, yeah, the Abrahamic faiths are homophobic. Let's whatever. I'm not gonna
Sure.
hide
Sure.
behind any of that. So if you hear that, okay, well, queer theory will help you fight homophobia and transphobia, yes, it's the antithesis of what you are fighting against, but you don't have any other real point of reference. So
Mm.
you're just trading one faith for another, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going from one, okay. So in Canada with the gender stuff, they passed they said, oh, we're going to make this a anti-conversion therapy bill, and so it's affirmation care only for trans kids, and so, but that's another form of conversion therapy because if from all the studies and I've read and all the people I've spoken to, roughly about 85% of those kids will grow out of it, or they will end up being gay or lesbian. So if you're performing these surgeries before they end puberty, or you're giving them puberty blockers and all this, like that's another form of conversion therapy. And so it's stuff like that. Like that's sorry to ramble a bit more, but like the first thing that struck me when I got back from overseas was a quote by Milton, and it's from Paradise Lost, and it's abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is, and saw virtue in its shape, how lovely, and pined his loss. Now, the loss that he was pining was not just the fact that the armies of heaven beat the armies of hell. He says it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But he was also pining the loss that he wasn't the worst. Like he saw how awful goodness was, how implacable it was. It just came down and nothing got its way. And I was like, these people have made goodness awful. Like the social justice warriors, whatever you call them, they're making goodness awful. They're, anti-racism should be a good thing, but Kendi has just poisoned that term.
Right.
And it's then the next thing I saw was, it was just you'd see Hitchens use this a lot. It was from A Man from All Seasons, and it's Thomas More's talking to basically like a witch hunter type of thing from the Church of England. And he's like, he said like, to catch the devil, would you burn down the law? And this guy Roper says, yeah, I'd burn down every law in England if I could catch the devil. And then Thomas More says, well, what would you do when the devil turned around? You have no laws to protect you. And that's what these people, like, I see it happening in the States. It's happening in Canada where there is an overcorrection happening and they're pushing, but the woke have so weakened civil liberties that they have nowhere left to hide when these things are coming from the other side now. And it's just, so like my worry about all this, and like that's one of the reasons I got into all this was, like I said, the Islam thing, and where did this all come from? But I'm like, the backlash is going to be bad. And so sorry, like I said, I just kind of went off, just rambled and went off on a tangent there, but that's, that's where I'm coming from this. So when you're talking about someone like Singh, I think he's a true believer. I think he came into it, got it up, picked it up in college. I don't know what his background is. I don't know how much he read or didn't read before, but I think he started believing in it, and he's a true believer. But now he's doing, like I said, well, he's making goodness awful. He's there's a backlash coming, and it's starting to build.
But now, it's interesting because what's your temporal sense of the backlash that's coming? I know that some people, when they hear that term, they'll think, oh, like maybe in a few years it'll be coming. To take a longer perspective, I think that what will happen is we'll have a younger generation of people born in the 2030s and the 2040s. And like all young people in history, they're going to rebel against the orthodoxy of their elders, of their parents, of their grandparents. They're going to be different. They're going to be like hippies or beatniks. And so as that generation born in the 2030s and 40s grows into their adulthood in the 2050s and 2060s, they're going to bring about the counter, because they're going to emphasize the individual more than the hyper collectivism that their adults and teachers and coaches and principals tried to impose on them when they were young. So that's my sense, is that it's going to be a generational change, but it will happen.
I'm going to let you jump in, Jen, but I just on that I'm going to push back just because.
Sure.
It was just a survey came out about Gen Z, and like I think it was like 3/4 of them want to have cameras in the home and things like that. It's once that kind of state goes in, the rebelling is going to be a lot harder. Like I agree with you that kids will rebel and whatever, but it's how much of that comes in. So it's I'm calling what's going on in education they're woke madrasas, and it's not everyone who goes to a madrasa comes out as ISIS, but quite a lot of them come out willing to support the action, not actually go out and do it, but they will defend it. They'll be apologists for it, and they'll say, yes, it was good and it was right, and they'll agree with it. And so that's my thing. Like, yes, Gen Z and like some of the trans stuff, whatever they're pushing back right now. I've seen like in some protests, the kids are like pulling down the flags and whatever, but that's kids being kids and whatever. But if everything else, like if they put in that control state, if they put in all that, and this stuff is starting in kindergarten now, and it keeps going. It's give me the child until he's 7, and I'll show you the man. Right? Like it's
that's true. That's true. And I'll just push back just a tad. 3 examples. give us hope and inspiration. Example number one. So where did the beatniks come from in the 1950s, right? I mean, they were born in probably one of the most conforming ages imaginable, but yet they became hipsters. They celebrated difference, right? Number two, where did the hippies come from in the 1960s? Once again, they were probably born in the 1950s, a conforming age of Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and whatever. They rebelled. And number three, the good old people in Prague in the 1960s and 70s, they were born in communism, but they took to the streets and rebelled against their communist overlords by
Yeah,
1977.
I mean, I will. Okay, so the hippies and the beatniks, we weren't an authoritarian state. The U.S. was not a surveillance state per se. I know there was McCarthyism and stuff like that, but it was not.
Right, right.
It was not per se. And even in like, actually, okay, I did poli sci, and I concentrated on Central and Eastern Europe, so I kind of know a bit.
Right, right. So you know this stuff, right?
Yeah, so a bit of the Czech stuff also was Czechoslovakia and Hungary were the least adopting of the communist ideologies. They were also some of the
Mm,
first to go free market before
mhm,
communism fell, like, or a freer market before communism fell. So it,
right,
they had it. They were going along as much as they could because they were in the Warsaw Pact and they needed the support of Russia. But there was still, the whole Bohemian thing. There was still an air of some freedom in there. But as soon as they did start to protest, I mean, you had like Prague '68,
right, right.
like things like it was crushed down fairly quickly. It just,
It was.
yeah. And I know we can go back to the riots in the States and the
Right, right,
FBI
right,
and
right,
like the Black Panthers and all that.
right, right,
Like, but
right.
at least you had the constitutional freedoms to speak.
And you think those are gone now?
I think they're being eroded. In Canada, they're gone. We have hate
Mm.
speech laws now. We have the government is
Oh
controlling
my.
what you can see on the internet. We've had hate speech laws for a long time, but they're getting stricter. The government
Stricter,
can
yeah.
can control what we can see on the internet. Uh, Facebook and places like that are talking about pulling, not letting people post news ads because the government wants to charge them money, like news stories and things like that. So we're getting a lot of things. Um, if enough people in the states, if the culture shifts against free speech, you can push your politicians to have a constitutional argument in the House, and you can get rid of the First Amendment. I mean, there is a mechanism to get rid of it. It's there, and if enough of the
Right.
people want that, and I mean, take a look at the lawyers that are coming out of Stanford and Yale and um,
Yeah, yeah,
like
that's true.
NYU or whatever City University in New York, like
Right.
the commencement speaker they just had. I mean, if that's what lawyers are coming out as, and if this is the general, then yeah, it's not safe.
Yeah, yeah. And a little bit, a tiny micro pushback. Those strident, loud people at Stanford Law School discover that their speech, their protests have a cost. Do you think that moderate federal judges are going to be eager to hire as clerks students that participate in the shouting down of a sitting federal judge? I don't think so. So they may find employment difficulties, I think.
Okay,
Hmm.
yeah, that's true. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, Jen, we've kind of hogged the
No, Jen, yeah,
conversation.
yeah, right,
No,
right, right,
yeah.
right.
I mean, I'm enjoying listening too. I would say I'm not. I love Wink's optimism. I am not sure, Obeyed like you. I think that I'm concerned. Where I'm concerned is what I'm seeing, and this is kind of the work that I'm doing outside of the book, is our education system, particularly how we teach and train teachers, and then what
Mhm.
they take and train to our young kids. This is, I mean, and again, Wink could be right that it is they rebel against what we're teaching, but I think so much of it is subterfuge. I mean, it's coming in ways that I don't think you can the common parent can't really pinpoint because it comes in under the radar. And I mean, it's like we were saying, I mean, who doesn't love diversity? I mean, diversity is a great word,
Mm.
it's how you define it. And so I am nervous that at some point this indoctrination is so complete that we can't see the water that we're swimming in.
Yeah, okay. Like you're talking about the teaching and all that. Yes, so yes, the colleges of ed need to be fixed, and also in the schools. But like something you mentioned there. So I use an example of Huck Finn. And I said, okay, if you have a woke teacher, so a parent can look at a syllabus and go, oh, yeah, okay, my ninth grader is reading Huck Finn. I read Huck Finn, great book, awesome, right? But
Right.
you have a woke teacher come in there. They can take Huck Finn and they can say that Huck exploited Jim's emotional labor. And by setting him free, he set himself up as a white savior, yet went back to his life of privilege. I mean, you can totally corrupt the message of that
Sure.
book,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's like that's where I'm like Jen, I'm with you with the education, and I'm neither optimist or pessimist. I'm just like let's see what it is and let's fix it. But my biggest issue with most of this stuff is we're talking about what they're putting in the curriculum. My biggest issue is the problem with education in Canada and the US is, 65% of the kids can't do math or read at a grade level. And like math is something like 85% can't do it are not proficient in math.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the problem. We shouldn't have be having an
Mm,
argument of whether this is
mm,
CRT or
mm,
not or whatever. We should
yeah.
like this has not we've been doing this for 30 years. It's not, no child left behind. It's like, all children left behind. It's you're
Yeah.
screwing up a lot of kids, and you're hurting the ones, you're hurting black kids, you're hurting Hispanic
Oh
kids.
yeah.
And and you, and you say you want to help them. So like that, my biggest issue is, if we're going to talk about this, let's talk about what needs to work. But
Mm,
then we get into the secondary argument because this stuff, that's all it's good for it, because it knows if you take it head on, it's going to lose because it's just ridiculous beyond belief. But so it has to come in sideways, and
mhm,
it's annoying. Sorry.
Do
mhm,
you, do you think that Black parents should be more aggressive when their little elementary school children are taught slogans like blackness is oppression, nothing else matters, whites are privileged, and you're not? It seems to me that Black parents of elementary school kids, like Charles Love,
Mm,
our friend Jen,
mm.
Charles Love, it seems to me that that's the natural market of dissidents who should take to the classrooms and put a stop on that. What do you think?
Of course. I mean,
Mhm.
but with the black parents, there's a lot going on. So I don't know if you know who Lenore Skenazy is.
No,
Um,
no.
okay, so she started an organization called
let's
Free
go.
Range Kids, and it's
Okay.
or she goes by Free Range Kids, and it's called Let Grow, and it's
Yeah.
about giving kids independence. So it started because she let her daughter take the subway alone when her daughter was in like eighth grade or something like that.
Okay.
And she wrote an article, an op-ed in the New York Times, and then she got all kinds of hate, like, "How could you do that? Your daughter could have been raped and killed, and blah blah blah." And I was thinking to myself, I was 6 years old, was a latchkey kid coming home alone, like, so like, but yeah, like, so she started this, and it's to give kids confidence, but it's also the other side of it is parents are so required to hover over their kids that they don't have time for anything else. So, you know, you don't have time to do your budget. You don't have time to do this. So you're taking the kids all these places. Yeah. Someone could say, well, you could look at the curriculum while you're sitting
Mhm,
waiting for the karate class, but maybe you got like 20 other things to do.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
you know, when a lot of people say, why aren't the parents looking into it? I think after COVID, a lot of parents saw what was going on. That's when they became involved. Before that,
Mm,
I don't think they had the time, and they never
mhm,
really
mhm.
paid attention. And
Right.
you know, and I don't want to, use one of the jargon terms, but it is a systematic problem because you've got laws hindering parents, then you've got this stuff coming in from the other end, and
mhm,
no one was really paying attention to what was going on because no one had time, and
Mhm,
now they're kind of forced to do it. And
mhm.
then the FBI labels parents far right extremists. So go figure.
Maybe homeschooling. What do you think about homeschooling as a solution?
I think it, again, it depends on what's being taught and how it's being
Mm,
done, but um, you know, again, I'm neither optimist or realist, but I'm worried about, like, in Illinois and in Indiana, the government has added in stuff for certification for teaching, and I think for even for like, so they're trying to affect that in homeschooling as well. So you have to take
mm,
these DEI courses to get your certification. So if
mhm,
you're not certified as a teacher, homeschooling might not work. So
mm,
there is, like, again, here's where I might sound pessimistic, but you know, I'm sorry, but the long march through the institutions is, to me, it looks like they're starting to take their victory lap.
mm,
It's we. there's so much, like, if you want to talk about education, you need to fix the certification. You need to fix colleges of education. You need to, you know, have a decent
Yeah.
conversation about what is banning a book and what is a school deciding whether that's fit for the curriculum. Like, we have, like, I spoke to Greg Lukianoff about that, and
Yeah.
he said, yes, when you take away a book like what's that name of that book? It's got the picture of the boy, like, giving fellatio to another boy, and it's like they were being taught in like third grade or something like that. And he said, yeah, that's not age appropriate, so that's not
Right.
counter to the First Amendment. So, but you need to have those conversations, and you need to have a legitimate conversation. But we're not having those, and it's like, that's just one thing. If you want to talk about healthcare, like, I mean, I wrote a report on oncology. It said where you shouldn't really consider biology and oncology because if you look at women's cancer rates and men's cancer rates, you could be transphobic. I'm like, people are going to die.
That's ridiculous, right? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, sorry. Like, that's
Do you have hope that when things are blatantly ridiculous, that's when the thing cracks? When things are
I,
blatantly ridiculous.
I hope so, but it's how many people. Okay, so you're not really online. Like, I don't think you have Twitter. I don't even
Right.
think you have
Not
Facebook.
really.
So
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
so you, like, you see more of what's going on in the outside world, but and I it's not like I live on Twitter or anything, but I do
Right.
go out and I see little things. I
Mhm.
you know I see how just reaction is. Um, at one of my last jobs, the HR manager or director of HR, she was proudly said that we're giving out referral bonuses if you refer someone, and if it's someone who's BIPOC or LGBTQ, we'll give you an extra $100. You know,
Uh-huh.
okay, so I mean, that's like, like I said, that's real world. That's not something on Twitter, but it's
Was
also,
was that was that in Canada or the
yeah,
US?
it's in Montreal.
Oh, okay, okay. See, that's you guys don't have like a 14th Amendment, huh? You don't have like an equal protection clause or a
Hell, our government has posted ads for employment where they said, basically white people can't apply. So is our national broadcaster. So are some of our biggest banks.
wow. You guys are sunk. I want to be pessimistic. You're sunk. That can't be challenged. Golly.
No, but
Sorry.
no, but okay, we've got affirmative action baked into our Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Oh, right, right, right.
So
So yeah, so you know what that does, right? I mean, that just leads to resentments and
mhm.
grudges and tribalism, and then you end up at that balkanized place down the road. I mean,
Oh,
that's what happens.
but
Right.
also what you're getting now is there is building a white racial consciousness, and I'm sorry, but
Sure.
you're in two white majority countries. Canada doesn't have nearly the amount of guns as the U.S., but I think it's 1/3 of the population is armed.
Mhm.
Um, you know, whereas I think you've got, what, 20 guns per person or something like that. Like, in a majority population white country, that's that armed to the hilt,
Mhm.
and you're turning out kids who are not well balanced. You don't want to, like, start raising a white racial consciousness. I'm sorry, you just don't.
Sure. Right, right. That's counterproductive. That is, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like you've seen a lot of with a lot of the school shootings. I mean, there is, I don't know, I don't think that there might necessarily be causality between what's going on, but I think that we do live in a world that is less connected. For being as uber connected as we are, is less connected interpersonally, and I think that that's probably where you see a rise in a lot of the violence among youth.
I mean, okay, so again, reports are coming out now. Gen Z is, like, doing really badly. Jonathan Haidt's been talking about this, how badly they're doing mentally, and it's
Mhm.
neuroses and anxiety and all this.
Hmm.
But I keep going back to the Dalton Academy in New York City. So this is whatever, K through 8,
Yes.
something like $45,000 a year, private school.
Hmm.
And then they started doing affinity groups in 2015 from grade 3 to grade 8. And all the kids, except for the white kids, told that they were told that they were oppressed, and Whitey was the one doing it. And the white kids told us that you were the oppressor in all these. So the kids started going online and just looking up things like, what's good about my race, what's bad about these races, and they all turn into ethno nationalists. All of them. within a matter of a few months because then there's still to this day there's racial violence going on in those schools, and there's a few other schools that were doing similar things. And so, like,
See, but see, that's kind of my point. And I could be wrong, but my point is what you've just described is hyper identity politics. It's
yeah,
hyper
Mhm.
collectivism. It's you're being an avatar for your group. Your human dignity as a person is lost, it's
mm,
gone. But my intuition tells me that individualism is a constant part of the human condition. It may go underground for a generation or two. You're going to have blowback, not necessarily in a bad way. People ultimately are individuals and they're going to react to that, I think. Look at it this way. If you look at the Briggs Myers test, there are 16 different personalities, right? I'm an INFP, Jen is an INFJ. But the point being, if nothing else, there are certain personalities that are individualist to the core, are anti-collectivists. There are some personalities like myself and Jen, we're just not on board with the whole affinity avatar for your racial group thing. We're not going away. We're going to remain in existence. And I just think that maybe our role is to give inspiration to the next generation of kids to rediscover their individuality. You're more than a race. You're not just an avatar for your skin color. To me, that's so retro. That's like 1823, not 2023, right? Or am I missing something? Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. But it seems to me that the future is with the individual. The past is with race as a determinant of all that you are. Call me crazy, I don't know. But you're not going to make me into a racialist. You just can't. It's just not my personality. And Jen's probably the same way. So maybe we're the hope. Maybe we're the hope for the future. Because of our personalities, we will provide the resistance, the oasis of a better way of being in the world. What do you
well,
think?
I'm okay. Look, I think it's this is Gen X's fight.
Mm-hmm.
Where the people have to do it, and but then I also say Gen X, we would have been known for our apathy if we had cared enough. So let's see what
Right, right.
happens. Yeah,
Well, we're here talking about caring enough, so let's.
Right.
yeah.
That's true. That's true. When I was I sound like an old baby boomer, right? But I remember when I was in school back in the 1970s, the big achievement of our lifetime was the collapse of public school segregation. Brighter future was public school desegregation. The brighter future was getting to know people as individuals, not as caricatures for their race. I mean, that was kind of the big North Star for an entire generation of kids in the South. In the South, no more, moreover, not New York City or Manhattan or Boston or Cambridge, but the South. And so it just seems like such a historic slap in the face for people at Dalton School to reverse all that we knew and stood for back when it really did matter that you saw the individual more than you saw the race. It just seems like a slap in the face to our generation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, uh, it's just gone backwards. Like I don't understand. Like
Well, backwards before the 1970s. That's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's
It's
not
just
just backwards. It's
yeah,
like retro.
and it's and whether it's race or it's gender,
Yeah,
it's gone back to like the 1950s. You know,
yeah, that's
all
it.
of a
Yeah,
sudden, parents are being told if your little boy likes long hair, then he must be a girl. If your little boy plays with dolls, he must be a girl. It's
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then the other side of that, a friend of mine, Joe's got a little kid, went to get Halloween costumes with another friend
Sure.
of his. He went to pick up his friend went to pick up some costume for his friend's son, and his
Yeah.
friend's son said, "Oh, I don't know if I can wear that. That might be offensive." And this was like a little 8-year-old kid. He's worried about if the costume is going to be offensive or not. I'm like, the little kid should not be worrying about that. Like, go dress up however the fuck you want to go dress up for Halloween. If it makes you happy, do it, kid. Like, within limits, obviously. But like, come on.
Yeah, yeah. He could wait until Yale for that to be worried about offense and Halloween costumes. Like
Seriously.
he's a little too young for.
I mean, talk about anxiety though. When we talk about things like that, I am so glad we did not have social media when I was dressing up for Halloween. I mean, and I think there is that social anxiety that we just didn't have. We talk about this in the book a little bit, but for me, Wink talks about Jack and Jill as one of the organizations that his family is a part of. I was a part of something called Indian Princesses. Well, I'm sure that it's no longer called that if it's even in existence. But talking about Halloween, I love dressing up as an Indian princess. Like to me, that was like I was a badass. It's like wow, how cool is that? It was out of honor again. So, I mean, then I think when I think about could I have been caught on tape and would I have been like, would that have ruined my life? I mean, no wonder our kids are more anxious.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, what was that was it a young girl or young guy? Um, Someone found they'd been accepted to a university. They were just about to graduate. Someone found a videotape from when they were like a tape or a video from when they were in like seventh grade or something like that.
Sure, sure.
And it was them singing a rap song, and they said the N word because they were
Sure.
singing a rap song. And then all of a sudden, scandal canceled. The university withdrew their acceptance. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
You know what I find fascinating, and I've mentioned this once, I think, with Jen before over the 4 years once. I mean, having praise to heaven, my experience. I mean, let it be said that it was the South, and it was a desegregated school, and there were people who were prejudiced and bigoted. And so, for example, I know of two classmates who were not shy about using the N word in my presence. And I've always wondered if they'd had social media back in the 1970s, what would have happened to those two people? But I know where they are, who they are today. I mean, this is the question. Do I, as a minority in the year 2023, have an ethical and moral duty to out them for use of the N word in the 1970s, or has too much time passed? Or have they changed? Have I changed? What do you
yeah.
think?
Well, okay. Again, you're talking about when you were in school. So how
Right,
old were they?
right.
Okay, so there's that. But also,
Teenagers.
yeah. Okay, I'll take two parts of that question.
Sure.
If they had social media in the 1970s, what would have happened? I don't think much would have happened because the social mores were different. And I mean, look, I remember season
Well,
two
that's
of
a good
Matt.
point.
I remember season two of Mash. Okay, I wasn't here and I didn't watch. I saw
Yeah,
reruns of
yeah,
it, and they
yeah.
had a character called Spear Chucker Jones in season two of Mash. Okay, and
Uh-huh.
so like I had that. I mean, like
Right.
Archie Bunker was not exactly the most tolerant character, and you couldn't do that today. Some of the stuff he
Right, right,
said. Now,
right.
okay, like when it comes to we're talking right now, and I'm not going to use the word. I'll say N word. But
Sure, sure.
if let's say we were discussing, I believe it's a speech from Frederick Douglass, and he actually uses the word, and we're discussing that. Or if I'm talking about uh, Dick Gregory's
Hmm.
autobiography, I'm going
Hmm.
to use the word. Like
Right, right.
it's like I'm again. I think when I'm with John McWhorter on this, it's where you know no, you don't use it liberally, and you don't walk down the street calling people that, whatever.
Sure,
But
sure.
if there is a purpose to it, like I said, you're discussing Dick Gregory's autobiography, and he called it
Hmm.
nigger. So I'm sorry, I
Hmm.
can't discuss it without using
Sure.
the word.
Uh-oh, it's going to
Like
be canceled.
yeah, whatever. I mean, look. First of
Right.
all, you have to be picked up to be canceled. So I don't think
Exactly.
I've.
There, and the audience will just hear clapping.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, so that's where I stand with the things
Yeah.
like that. But one thing I want to ask you, because you'd mentioned so it's now the desegregated schools, because
Right.
that had
Right.
an effect on like the Rosenwald schools. But okay, I'm not a fan of critical race theory, and I'm not a fan of Bell's
Right.
conclusions. But when in his the first, I don't know if it was the first paper he wrote, but the first paper by him that I read was Serving Two Masters, and he talked about,
Mhm.
he said they should have desegregated education, not the schools, which to me is a
Mhm.
valid point. Whereas,
What does he mean by that?
okay, if you'd actually made black schools better, if you want to call them black schools, right? If you'd
Oh,
made
I see. I
if you'd
see your
made
point.
them better instead of busing them, kids 2 hours or an hour
Mhm.
each way to a different school, that would have been a better outcome. I agree with that, but at the same time, too,
Mhm.
I think if there, it, you know, Brown v. Board of Education basically forced the Rosenwald schools to close down because white families did not want to, especially in the South. From what I've read and whatever, didn't want to
Mhm.
send their kids to black schools, even though
Yeah.
they were better performing schools than the white school right next to it. So,
Well, let me
you
give you
know,
my experience, and you
yeah,
can take it for what you will. There's a lot of nuance and complexity there. So, in my county, first and second grade, I attended an all-black school, all black, 100% black school. It was a great experience, great teachers, and it was within walking distance of my home. 1970, 69, fall 69, the county integrates schools, desegregates schools. So now I go to a formerly all-white school. I'm the only black kid in my class. And I take the bus. It's not too far, but I take the bus. And then uh, my family moves out to the suburbs. And it's really interesting because the county is desegregating. There used to be this black and white school system. Now there's just one school system. So in the fourth grade, I attended a formerly all black school, but my school was only 8% black. So 92% of my classmates were white, but they were in a formerly all black school the year before. Fifth grade, I attended a formerly all white school, same racial percentages, but we kind of went back and forth. And then in the sixth grade, I attended a brand new middle school for junior high school, never segregated a day in its life. It had only known integration. I refer to that as the New South. And then in high school, I attended a formerly all white school that was 8% black, but many kids attended a formerly all black school that was now mostly white middle school. So my point is, there was a lot of complexity in Southern communities, and I think in some way that was healthy because if you were a black kid or a white kid in my generation, odds are you attended a school that used to be all black and you attended a school used to be all white. So I think that just really helped in terms of racial understanding because you were literally in a building that could have been black this year and white the next year.
okay. Yeah, it's just, I
Yeah,
mean, like I said, because I know I think you'd mentioned that you'd studied under Bill, so I was just wondering, like, what your
I
take would be.
did. I did. Yeah, he wrote my recommendation for law school. I
No,
love
okay.
this book. I mean, no, my recommendation to be a law professor. My apologies, to be a law professor. But he was a great professor, but I think he just became very disillusioned at the pace of racial equality in the South following desegregation. I think he was probably annoyed at the closure of many Black public school institutions. And he probably felt that a lot of work went into little positive advances. And so I think that caused him perhaps to become more dire and pessimistic. And I'm not really sure whether or not that was a power play on his part or if he generally became depressed about race and saw it as a permanent condition. I don't know. I can't say. But I think that his ideas have done much damage to the spiritual health of Black school children. Because I think Black school children were better served by a more positive attitude towards race in the South. I think that kids in the 1970s were much more optimistic and hopeful than kids might be in the year 2023, and that's a tragedy to me. But to be fair to Derek Hell, because I read his treatise "Race, Racism, American Law," he argues that race tends to go through a cycle. There's a push for integration, which then is met with a push for segregation, which then results in a counter push for integration. So he would argue in his treatise that we always see these cycles between and desegregation, segregation and desegregation in Black educational history. I didn't really appreciate that at the time in 1970 or 80 because I was of the New South generation. But now that I see these strange affinity groups in white private schools, I see echoes of what he was talking about. Maybe we're fated to go through a new phase of segregation in desegregated institutions. I am reminded of my niece, whom Jen met a while ago, who who went to mostly white private schools, but chose consciously to live in a all black dorm at her college. And I kind of thought that was maybe a step back because she's not engaging in the larger world. But I think she was looking for solidarity. And I know, Jen, if you'll touch upon that, I know that that spoke to you, her choice to live in an all black dorm, even though her upbringing was mostly white private schools. Why did that
Yeah.
stick with you, that choice?
Well, there are a few things. One of the things that she said that I thought was, well, let me start by saying I was at first disappointed because it felt to me that, she'd lived a very nice life, a life of empowerment. And I don't think she felt herself as ostracized due to the melanin in her skin. And then to go to Stanford, make this choice, then all of a sudden she started to, I think she might have even said she started to see these things that she didn't really see before. And so I feel like, you know, part of her life story that was unique for herself became wrapped into a larger narrative. Wink, as you often say, that blackness is oppression, nothing else matters.
Mhm.
Wrapped into a narrative that is focused on the past and not really how to move towards a future. So I would say at first I was disappointed. That said, what also struck me about what she said was very interesting because she said, you always like to say, I grew up until the age of 8 in an all black neighborhood. The
Right,
street was named after, the Twyman neighborhood,
right,
Twyman
right.
Road. And so Wink will often tell people, Obey, that he grew up in this amazingly viewpoint diverse community, but it was all black. And so he felt like he could easily go into the larger world because he appreciated different points of view. He appreciated
Mm,
disagreement. And he saw that in his, you know, homogeneously black life until 8 years old. And so what Wink's niece said, and I thought very astutely, was Wink, you had that. And that was what you had that catapulted you into the larger world. I
mhm.
never had that. And so who's to say that me getting this now isn't that same, developmental milestone that you had when you were young? And to me, I was like, that makes sense too. So
Mhm.
I still am disappointed by the fact that we're back, kind of, I think, backsliding into segregation. But I also take that you had a foundational experience that allowed you to better navigate the larger world, no matter the color. And perhaps she did had yet to kind of find that in her own upbringing. I don't know.
And that's a deep idea. I mean, that's a deep thought. And maybe that would explain the need for historically black colleges and universities, that it provides people that an analogous anchor, if you will. But on the other hand, I'm going to push back just a nanobit, just a nanobit. The world, my dear Jen, is not 100% black. The world is what, 18% black? The US is 13% black. San Diego is 5% black. Don't you really better prepare yourself for the larger world if you live and learn and have friends who constitute the larger world? What's your thought on that, Ode?
Okay, so I'll give you my. So I lived in India till I was 6. So
Mhm.
they're like talk about homogeneous. There's the Hindu, Muslim
Right.
split, but whatever. But as far as skin color,
Brahmin,
look,
Brahmin.
yeah. So yeah, but as far as skin color and look, so
Yeah.
there's that. When we moved to Canada, we initially lived in a more like it was more. I shouldn't say more integrated, but there was pockets of South Asians in there. So there was like Canada, because of multiculturalism, became more ghettoized than the idea of the melting pot. So,
Oh.
it was, but then after a couple of years, we moved to a neighborhood that was, and it wasn't like it was like my dad was saying we want to move to a white neighborhood or whatever, but he just said like I didn't move my family from India to Canada to live in Little India. He goes, I want my family to live in Canada. I want my you know
Right.
we should integrate. We should mix in
Yeah.
with our society. So we moved to a more white neighborhood. And then again, when we moved after that, it was another suburb, and that was predominantly white. And I go, okay, but Canada is more white than the US if you look at like demographics and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I remember in my high school, I think there was maybe it was a grad class of I think 150, a little bit more, and I think there's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
I think there's about 10-15% that wasn't white, all told. So I mean, it was, but I never had, so I didn't know anything else. I mean, I saw some of my friends of the family and stuff like that, like cousins who grew up more in um like neighborhoods where there's concentrations of South Asians. So and
Mhm.
more of their friends were Indian or Pakistani or something like that. Whereas almost all my friends were,
Yeah.
majority of them were white. That there was a couple that were Chinese. There was a couple others that were Indian, but the majority were white. And so it's so yeah. I mean, that's what I had, and I grew up like that. There was never any racism or anything like that. We all joked with each other. We pushed each other as far as we could.
Right.
Friend who was German, we'd call him a Nazi, and just like whatever. Like we were just, but this
Right.
was boys being like we were just kidding around stuff. But we never had that. Like my father was the same way. He had friends even when he was in India. Like he just did not have only Muslim friends, or like he had
Hmm.
friends from all quarters, and when he was
Hmm.
in Canada as well, like friends and business relations and acquaintances, everything like of all stripes. Like I
Yeah.
remember, like at his funeral, there was yes, majority of people were Muslim, but there were Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus,
Yep.
like everyone, like every stripe, the people were there, and it's just. And so yeah, I mean, when I see the segregation in dorms, when I see like the what was it, segregated graduations and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a meme that's gone around, and it's there's a workman putting up a sign, and he's scratching out people of color, and then he's scratching out of color. Then in front of people, he's writing no, sorry, it said colored people's dorm, so he's scratching out colored, then he's putting a people of colored dorm, and then there's a black student who said, "Oh, finally we have a place of our own." The workman's like, "Yeah, we just dug this out of the basement." Like it's just, I'm just like yeah, you're going back to the 50s. You're going back to, you know, segregation. It's just,
Yeah.
and they're making it sound good. Like, oh, we're having like affinity groups. It sounds so nice, but they're not. They're just segregated clubs. It's just,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
But do you think, is there something almost inevitable about this process, this cycling? I mean, I think it's like the grass is greener on the other side. Could it be that the generation born in segregation desired integration, and then the generation born in integration desires segregation, and then the
the,
cycle repeats itself because the grass is always greener? What do you think about
okay,
that?
the way I think this happened, and it's just, again, this is just me going, a layman. I mean, yeah, I did poli sci, but I'm an IT geek.
Right,
I
right,
came
right.
from the outside looking in. So if you read all this stuff, you look at what the start of CRT, look at when Crenshaw and McIntosh and all them started writing
Crenshaw.
about started writing about intersectionality and everything. So CRT got coined, and I think it was a conference in 1989 where they came up with that term, and they started doing it. Intersectionality was starting to come out. The first people, so it, like, then you could start having feminism and courses with that intersectional. I think intersectionality was the thing that really did it. And so courses with that intersectional lens in sociology and anthropology and African American studies, and then you also had
Mm-hmm.
it in feminism, stuff like that. Then you went from women's studies to gender studies. Like things
Right,
changed.
right.
So the first people who came out with masters and maybe PhDs came out in the late 90s. And then these
Okay.
people started going back into politics, back into the administration of the schools, back then into like HR departments and things like that, into
Mm-hmm.
entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the long march to the institutions. I'm not saying anyone did this
Yes.
by design, but you're going to hire like-minded people. So, let's say right after 9/11, the Bush government, like, okay, we're going to go into Iraq, we're going to do all this. Okay, we're getting blasted on racism and Islamophobia and everything. So we're going to go hire some people on race. So who do you go look for? People with degrees in sociology, focusing on CRT or focusing on African American studies or whatever. Like you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
and these people came out with that lens. So
Mm-hmm.
it slowly baked itself in, and it started building and building and building. And you've gotten to the point now where the CDC is deciding to give out vaccines according to race. You know, you've got med schools telling doctors to take DEI oaths above the Hippocratic oath. So it it got so baked in, and it's just now it's at a point where I'm like, you know, you either have to burn these institutions to the ground and start from new, or you have to like actively you have to look at this as people bringing in a religion. So if someone started proselytizing Christianity or Islam in the office, you have grounds to fire them. If you're proselytizing this stuff in the office, you have grounds to get fired. And I think that's
Mm.
how we have to start looking at it. And it's like again, I'm trying to be realistic. I think if you can get that
Sure.
done, then might have a chance to push back. But if you can't, where like I said, the long march through the institutions is taking that victory lap.
So where is the modern day classical liberal Kimberly Crenshaw? Where's the modern day classical liberal Derek Bell? Where are the people who have the intellectual tools and resources to bring about the new movement?
Okay,
Where are
well,
they?
Well,
I actually that actually ties into what I was going to ask Jen,
Okay,
which
there you
oh,
go.
is
thanks, great, because I was going to jump in there.
okay because yes, the Institute for Liberal Values. So I've spoken with David, and
Yeah.
I've they've been around for a little bit, and I know they kind of absorb counterweight and stuff. So I think that's a good place to start. Of where are these people? Because I could point out people like Helen Pluckrose, and again I
Hmm.
mentioned John Recorder. I can
Hmm.
there's other people out there
Coleman
who are right.
Hughes,
Yeah, Coleman
Mary
Hughes.
Foster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there are some people out there. So but Jen, since you're working with them and you're a director, you like talk about them and their mission and like because I want to just not talk about how this stuff is bad and I don't like it. I'd rather, you're actually starting to do something about it. Fire is actually starting to do something about it. So I'd like to focus on that a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, look, I want to be conscious of you guys' time. So please, if I'm hogging your time, let me know. I
Oh,
don't
I'm
want
fine.
to.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love, thank you for the question because I'm so passionate about what we're doing. And I'm so passionate about the people that I get to be with every single day, including Wink. And while Wink is a practicing attorney, he's always rooting, for us in the Institute of Liberal Values. But really think if you want to see what it's about and who the change makers are, I would look at the board of directors. I mean, again, so honored that I'm in this group of people, but you've got Eric Smith, who I would put at the top of that list, Jason Littlefield, Xander Kegg, David Bernstein, that you already mentioned, obeyed. And all of these people are work. One of the things that we're doing together as a group. So this, and when I say as a group, not just ILV, but Free Black Thought, Empowered Pathways, JILB with David. And something new that Eric's working on called mutual persuasion. But what we're doing together is this coalition for empowered education. So we're taking these ideas around empowerment theory that Eric uses a lot in his work and that Jason Littlefield has been using a lot in his workshops. And we're actually pushing back. This is where I get excited because I really do feel like this is where the answer is. We're pushing it back against teacher training. To start, we're pushing back against teacher training, the liberated ethnic studies model and the liberated ethnic studies curriculum. But we're not saying, and this is where this is, I mean, I get so frustrated in the United States because we're this either or society. So we're not saying we're versus on the right is saying let's just like do away with it all. No, let's just do it well and do it correctly in a way that empowers us in our individuality, no matter how much melanin we do or don't have in our skin. And here's the thing, what's exciting is, Obey, there's an interest for this, there's a need for this, we've received some funding around this. So even though I think that we are the dissidents, so to speak, or the insurgents, if you will, I see hope in the fact that people are coming together and these change makers are coming together and there's donors coming together and say we will help you to realize this because the real change is going to come in how we teach our kids around classical liberal values. And that's what's missing right now.
Jen, do you feel comfortable sharing some of the inspirational details from last year's conference in Chinatown, the New
Mm-hmm.
Alliances Retreat? Remember that?
Yeah.
There were about, you know the details, but there were like 40 to 50 leaders from
Yeah.
across the country devoted towards this idea, this mission. Talk about that for a bit.
I mean, that was brilliant. That was coming together. It was called the New Alliances Conference, Obeyed. And it was Black, Jewish, and Asian societies and groups and organizations and leadership coming together to see how we could talk about these issues that they are facing, as quote unquote minorities. And the coming together and the brain trust in that room, and the people who showed up because they believe so much that the
Yeah.
conversation that we're having, and ironically, the conversation that we're having that labels us as Black, Asian, Jewish, it's kind of this irony. We have to come together with these labels to push back against the labels themselves. But that's exactly what happened. I mean, you had Sheena Mason, who talks about theory of racelessness, right?
Yeah.
Camille Foster, who also kind of is like, let's race living in a post-racial world, and to see that coming together, and we are continuing to operate in that way through the Institute of Liberal Values with a tighter group of groups, but it's that network of various communities that are coming together because of race to work across.
Yeah, okay.
That I see the most hope.
It felt to me, I was there. It felt to me like the Niagara movement of our time, because there was such an energy and passion and brain trust in the room. Roland Fryer was there from Harvard. Jonathan Haidt was there. Leaders from the California Equal Rights Coalition, the group fighting CRT, were there. There was someone from Canada. Jonathan Kay was there. I could go on and on. Ian Rowe was there. It was like an all-star cast, some of the leading intellectual lights dedicated towards this proposition that we're more than avatars for our race.
Okay, on that, because this is one of the hypocrisies I see in this. So some of the things I've seen over since I got back from overseas was, okay, during COVID, there was a conference in Toronto about brown complicity and white supremacy. The organizers of this conference one of them is the head of the largest student union or school board in Ontario. The other one, she was like the chief editor for the Toronto Star, which is a major newspaper in Canada. And it was things about how like brown people getting hired gives white people an excuse to say they're not racist, takes away jobs from black people. Then I've seen things like yellow privilege and things like that. And then the anti-Semitism, like how Jews have white privilege and Jews have whiteness on them. And in the book In Defense of Looting, she writes about the Korean grocers on top of their stores during the Rodney King riots, and compares them to Jewish store owners in the 60s and the Watts riots, and said, just like the Jews in the 60s, the Koreans were the face of capitalism in their neighborhoods, and capitalism is whiteness. Nicole Hannah Jones, after the George Floyd riots, when synagogues got vandalized and a couple got burned, it's like whiteness is property, and it's only damage to property. And okay, Canada again. Our government paid this guy to be an anti-racist trainer for our national broadcasters, or our public broadcaster CBC. The day he became a Canadian citizen, he put out a tweet about how Canada is a colonizing country, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, the guy's a raging anti-Semite. He had tweets out. He was under the watch of CSIS, which is like the Canadian CIA, for lack of a better term, or it's a cross between CIA and FBI. And he also put out how, Jews should be killed, and I mean, just raging anti-Semite. And in his defense, he said, "Well, I'm only talking about white supremacist Jews." So you have this idea of Jews taking on whiteness. I mean, hell, sorry, because this this is real world harm that's being done, and it's so Israel and Gaza got into and Hamas got into a thing, rockets back and forth, blah blah blah. There's pro-Palestinian protests all across the country, and then around the world, but specifically in Canada, but Jews were being chased down the streets by these pro-Palestinian protesters. Okay, so this is happening in Canada. The first reaction Trudeau had, and he deleted the tweet a few hours later, was to warn people. But his first reaction was to warn people not to be Islamophobic. And so, David, and also there's Nicole Levitt. I've read things they've written where they were in Jewish organizations talking about a swastika drawn in front of a synagogue or something, and then there were people in that organization who wanted to talk about how this is affecting anti-blackness. And I'm like, well, no, if there's a swastika drawn in front of a synagogue, I think you should talk about anti-Semitism more than anything else. Maybe. So it's the hypocrisy that's built into it, and you're dividing yourselves up to be conquered. you know, again, in a majority white country,
Mm,
why do you want to split up the minorities?
hmm. Well, you know what? You know who split up the minorities? I'm pretty sure that was the work of Stalin. So,
Yeah,
I
but
mean, and that didn't end up well.
no, but it's I mean, it's like you're doing it to yourselves. Like you're like I just shake my head. I'm like, you're creating this white racial, you know, consciousness, and yet then you're dividing all the minorities to fight amongst themselves.
Yeah.
If I was a
Well,
KKK, I'd sit back and let them do it. Like, go ahead.
Hmm. Hmm.
well, one of my life principles is to not engage bullies, to not subject myself to manipulation, the use of slogan words, because really you can't argue with people who are committed to slogan words and jargon as an article of religious faith almost. So when you mentioned that the book was named in defense of looting, that was enough for me. I'm not a money guy, but that was enough for me, right?
Uh,
So so this is my thing. I keep coming back to, and if you disagree, let me know. But I keep coming back to this idea that maybe there's value for us of a similar mindset, kindred spirits, to look at how people in Prague did it. How did people in Moscow do it? How did Soviet dissidents do it? How do people who object to orthodoxy, conformist dogma, how do they turn things around? Because we may need to look to their examples for insights and for illumination on the path. Or maybe you would argue Prague can't help us. Soviet dissidents and their stories
no, no,
can't
you know
help
what?
us.
They can help us, but I think the problem here is people are scared and okay, they have some reason to be scared. Like I realize employment, whatever, but for the most part, we aren't in Prague. We aren't in, Soviet Russia. We aren't in
Mm-hmm,
a Muslim theocracy. We,
mm-hmm.
even in Canada with hate speech laws and stuff, we do have some speech and we can speak out. So people need to start getting brave. It's just,
Yes, yes,
people are scared and it
yes,
just like, Douglas Murray said this, if you're like, come on in, the water's not that bad. It's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
like it's like, and then, the whole Ayaan Hirsi Ali was talking about it. This was like with drawing Muhammad. It's like, spread the risk. The more people there is, and
yeah.
I believe we're in the majority. I believe like right now we're in the majority. There's more people that think like us than think like,
Mm-hmm,
the woke racist or the redneck, white supremacist racist, whatever. Like
mm-hmm.
it's we're in the majority, but people just need to stop being complacent and need to just grow a spine and just stand up for what's right.
And so, what do we do? How do we inspire more courage? Do we write more books, write more essays, articles, novels, screenplays? Do we testify more? Do we write op-eds? Do we do all of those things?
I
How
mean,
do we generate more courage?
all those things are good, but I mean, on an individual level, and again, this takes someone who's got the time and the ability. But okay, there's a guy in Canada, Chris Elston.
Mhm.
People call him Billboard Chris, and
Oh,
he's
yes,
okay.
yes.
He just does it for gender. And I mean, he's come to Montreal a couple of times. I've met with him. I've spoken
Mhm.
to him here, and you know,
Right.
he doesn't fight back. He's been beaten. He's had his bones broken. He's had his equipment broken.
Mhm.
He all he does is talk to people. So I mean, if
Mhm.
if you do something like that along, let's say, racial lines, I mean, I've joked about it where I was like, I'm going to get a sandwich board and just, Canada is not a systemically racist country, and we'll go across the country and have conversation. It's just,
Right.
you know, but like what you're talking about, we need all that, but I think we also need a grassroots. We don't need a top-down answer to this, and unfortunately, we're
Mhm.
getting some of that, like some of the legislations in the states, some of the stuff that's
Mhm. Mhm.
happening in Canada.
Mhm.
It's it's an overcorrection, and you're going too far the other way.
Mhm.
We need an actual grassroots. So parents defending education, that was a really good thing. But the
Mhm.
FBI is calling them right wing supremacists and Christian nationals. It's just SPLC is like labeling them as like a dangerous group. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there is some struggle in there, but people need to get brave. It's just like
Mhm.
like we're far too complacent. It's
Yeah.
it's like the late any late part of any empire. So like the later part of the Roman Empire or the Greeks or the British, like we've gotten we've gotten fat and rich and indolent and lazy and no one's doing anything. It's just, you know.
All right. I'm going to push back a little minor second, just push back a little bit. Have you heard the adage, hard times make strong men?
Yes.
Strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. So if that cycle is true, right,
Hmm.
then maybe we're going through weak times, but weak times will create the strong men that will then bring in the new good times. What do you think about that?
Yeah, but that's a long cycle. I
I
mean,
know, I
yeah,
know, I
okay,
know,
you
I
know, I
know,
mean,
I
it's
know, I know.
okay. Okay, look,
So
the fall of the Roman
when,
Empire.
when when Kimberly was at the faculty lounge in 1989, do you think she was thinking, I'm going to have intersectionality down within a year or two, widespread adoption? Or was she thinking 20 and 30 years down the road? She was thinking 20, 30 years down the road. The people who thought up the long march through the institutions were not thinking next year or 5 years or 10 years. They were thinking a generation or two. We have to do the same thing. We really do, I think.
Yeah, okay, yes, you have to think a generation or two. You have to go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll say the same thing about this. When I was in Afghanistan and when I first got there and I was looking at it and I saw like what was going on, this is a generational fight. You had the
right.
Taliban take over the schools and everything, and they've been living under this. You had no technology for like 20 or 25 years before the US came in. And
Right.
now, yes, you've had intersectionality in high schools in the US. Well, in some high schools, in some districts, I shouldn't, it wasn't like
Mm-hmm,
widespread, but starting back in around 2008, in Canada, you had it roughly around the same time in certain
mm-hmm,
provinces and certain school boards. But
right.
now it just like by 2017, I think it was in the States, it was in 16 states, K through 12.
Yeah,
In Canada, it was in, three of the provinces. And now, again, it's going widespread. So
yeah,
you,
yeah,
and then you take into social media, you take in, all the other, like, it's coming in from Disney, it's coming in from
yeah.
all sides for little kids. So it's a
But
generational thing. Like, but it has to start somewhere, and
exactly.
you need people who know what it was like before '97.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
the,
That's
the
right. That's so right.
and then you
That's
need
so
the
right.
people who have the awareness of what it was before. Like I used the night around '97 because, like I said, that's when the
Yeah,
intersectionality thing started really blowing up, and you
right.
need that mindset. You need those people to stand up now and say, okay, no, enough's enough. It was better back then. Let's go back to that mindset. You know,
Mm-hmm,
Mhm.
mm-hmm. That's so true. That's so right. One of my favorite podcasters is Lex Friedman, and he had an interview with I forget her first name, but I think her last name is Park. He's a famous North Korean.
you know me, Park.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
and they were talking about her experiences. And at one point, she said that her grandmother remembered a better time, how things used to be. And then she said she wondered why didn't grandmother speak up? Why didn't the old people, the grandparents, speak up? And Lex said, well, the problem was some people knew, but they were afraid to speak up, and then other people never knew there was a better way. And I fear that's where we're coming to in this age. There are people who remember a better time, but they have to not be afraid to speak up. And then there may be generations below us that never knew there was a better time. That's the scary
Hmm.
part.
Yeah,
People who never knew things could be different.
mhm.
That's scary.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that like I say, I worry about is I don't know if you've read David Deutsch's book, The Beginning of Infinity,
No,
and
no.
he talks about pockets of enlightenment that had happened throughout the world. So the Greeks and the Romans,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the Golden Age of Islam,
Right, right.
and then the Enlightenment. And so I say like my biggest fear is that 1,000 years from now, a future David Deutsch is going to write about us as a pocket of enlightenment that got extinguished. And I
Ooh,
don't want to see that happen. Because like I said,
right.
we're at late stage
Mm-hmm.
empire right now. The way we're acting, we're at late,
Mm-hmm.
and it's um a friend of mine, Faisal Al Muhtar and Melissa Chen, they have this
Mm-hmm.
organization, Ideas Beyond Borders, where they translate books on philosophy and science into Arabic, Farsi, and Kurdish, and they make it
Right.
available throughout the Middle East for free. And you know, they're doing that to spread these ideas back to the Middle East. And then again, I talked about the golden age of Islam. They do incorporate the fact that if it wasn't for free thinkers in that period in Islam that were, North Africans, and they were Arabs from Iraq, and they were Persians, and if it wasn't for them, this thought would have died out when the Mongols burnt Baghdad. And
Mhm.
because of them, it dispersed into Europe. So when, the mullahs and everything in these countries say, well, you're just being colonized again by accepting Western values. It's like, no, they're not Western values. These were values that, the Arabs kept alive, or Muslims kept
Mhm.
alive after the Greeks and the Romans. And it went into Europe.
Mhm.
Now you're bringing that knowledge back to yourselves. And so, like, that's part of their mission. But my thing is, if no one else picks it up and we let that flame get extinguished here, you it's going to take a few hundred years before these ideas come back. I mean, I don't. There's a really good article about this. It was in Aeon. It was this guy in Ethiopia. He was in the court, and the Catholics had already come in. I believe the king had converted to Catholicism. This guy had made a comment against Catholicism or against the king that went and hid out in a cave near this tiny village.
Mhm.
And in there, he wrote ideas that were very similar to like Kant and Hume, but 100 years before. And then people had found these writings of his, and so these are natural human ideas that can come up from other
Mhm.
places. So it's like I do think if it dies out, it's not going to stay dead for long, like forever. But we're going to suffer, and whatever. I'm going to be
Right,
selfish
right,
here, and like, yeah, no, I'd rather not.
right, 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 right. I agree with that totally, totally.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, do you think that the generations that Wink thinks has hope in, that there might be kind of a black swan event or something cataclysmic that can't be stopped once it started, that won't allow us
Aliens,
to get to, yeah, maybe, well, maybe aliens, to
artificial
get
intelligence.
to that better age.
I don't know. I mean, again, I hope something changes around, but I look at the K through 12, and I'm looking at it. It's like, you know, it's a school to extremism pipeline. So it's not just they're going to go to Antifa and BLM. They might go to, Proud Boys and Aryan
Mhm.
Nation or whatever. You,
Mhm.
you're going to have a larger pool of kids who are not stable for the extremists to like recruit from. So
Mhm.
we could have a really bad clash that might wake some people up, or it might just solidify lines, and then something horrific is going to happen. And
Mhm.
you know, like I said, whatever happens, I don't think it'll last forever because nothing does. Like look at my works, ye mighty in despair. But it's something will. If something bad happens now, and it gets, I don't think an oppressive system would last too long because they kind of eat themselves. But you're still going to have 70 to 100 years of absolute crap before things start getting better again.
Mhm.
I,
Mhm.
I like I said, I see what the problem is. I see what I'd like to get done. I'm not taking a bet either way how it's going to go. I just I'm hoping it goes for the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to go along with Jen's speculation, uh, I'm not sure I put too much stock in the discovery of alien spacecraft. I think that may just prove to be, yeah,
I
ancient
like the
aliens.
idea.
It's a nice idea, I wonder if there's more to chew on when it comes to artificial intelligence. Over the past few weeks, have been watching YouTube videos about that, and it really does seem like within 18 months or so, computers will have reached a level of IQ, artificial general intelligence, which is far greater than any single human. And I just wonder, what impact will that have on society? Will it, for example, collapse our sense of shared reality and maybe accelerate that collapse of reality? Or will it do to our sense of trust, collective trust? Because if you can't trust what you see on television, if there's so much photoshopping and virtual reality, what impact will that have on race relations? And I just don't know the answer, but it seems to me that if you have the rise of artificial intelligence that is so that is far superior to human intelligence, that's going to tip the part somehow, some way. I mean, for example, maybe we'll displace and render more people unemployed. Maybe it will accelerate the calls for reparations for American slavery as a backdoor for universal basic income, right? Because people will become even more superfluous. But I just don't know. Babe, what are your thoughts on that? Artificial intelligence and its role on race relations and
Ah,
race
okay. I mean,
promoting.
first of all, artificial
How's,
intelligence is a black box. Okay, yes, I work in IT. I look
oh,
after.
good.
Okay, it's a lot of caveats here. I look after communication
Okay,
systems. Like, yes,
right,
put me in the middle of a desert. Like, I've built up communication systems for the military in like the middle of Afghanistan. I've looked after
right,
internet
right,
systems up in
right.
northern Canada, so I can design and help you build that. I'm not a programmer. I don't know anything, but from what I can understand of artificial intelligence stuff, so there is already some built-in AIs. Like, so if you have a chatbot or whatever, that's an AI, right? You
Yeah,
have like
yeah,
Chat GPT, that's an AI. So you're talking about more of an artificial general artificial intelligence. So
right,
like chatbots and things like that are starting to get more generalized, but they're still fairly specific. Um,
right.
so it's a black box. Like now, I wish. Okay, my thing with artificial intelligence, so the things like the Chat GPTs and things like that, um, it's the way I look at Google. We treated information the way we treated other uh, the way we dealt with information. We were looking at it as a technological advancement, like let's say the washing machine. The washing machine lets you do your laundry a lot quicker than sitting by the river with a scrub
Hmm, hmm,
pad and doing your laundry and whatever.
hmm.
Okay,
Right, right.
so technology and inventions were to aid you and to help you and to make your life easier and to speed things along. We
Hmm,
dealt with information the same way. We didn't give ourselves the wisdom or the ability to glean what we were getting. And so, you know, whatever you, in the late 80s or whatever, if you're at a bar talking to people and you have like, stupid trivia and, like how many eggs did Cool Hand Luke eat and stuff like that. But now it's just like you get out your phone, you go on Google and you get an answer. And you blindly accept that answer. So
right,
with
right.
with things like Chat GPT and stuff like that, my immediate concern about AI is some people are using it to like help them write code and things like that, but they know what they're doing and they're using it to help them write code. But what's the next 10 years from now or 5 years from now? Are there going to be programmers that just rely on that to write your code for you, and they don't know how code is written? Like, so on the kind of IT work that I do, I've seen people like come up after me who didn't learn the basics and the fundamentals of like DOS and stuff like that and understand like how to get into how to get into a computer when Windows isn't working, how to like
Hmm,
solve that stuff out. So
hmm,
they just know how to use what's been given to them. So they don't. And so like now, if you using these AIs to write code for you, but you don't know exactly the mechanics of how the code works,
hmm, hmm.
that's a problem. Now, as far as what's it going to do for race relations and stuff, I mean, I don't even want to hazard a guess, but I don't know if you've ever heard of this thought experiment called Rocco's Basilex.
No,
Eh,
no, no,
Okay,
no.
so it was. I mean, a lot of people found it horrific, but Rocco's Basilex is basically about AI. So it's like, okay, if an AI is emergent and it's inevitable that a general AI will come about, it's better to help its inception than to not, because if it does come about and take over humanity, it will know those who helped it and then reward them.
Oh,
So
oh.
it's looking at it from like it's going to be a bad thing. So um, you know, I'm all for learning and I'm all for research and I'm all for you know, but I want caution. I think we're getting too ahead of ourselves in some things. Like just because we can do it, should we? Like, do we? I'm not saying that Skynet's going to come about or anything like that,
Right,
but
right, right, right.
but I look at some of those Boston Dynamics robots and I look at the way you see China do these really cool displays of drones and they're putting on these light shows and stuff.
Right, right.
I'm like, but they're showing you how much they can control that. and like they're showing you their power right there. So if you've got an AI controlling that, and that can be weaponized, that's dangerous. And then what's the AI going to do? You know, again, it's a black box. So if you tell it, figure out a way to fix homelessness, and it decides, well, the best way to fix homelessness is get these drones and go out and kill all the homeless people.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Right.
like we don't know enough about how we think. How are we going to create something that thinks like us, right? Quote unquote. Like it's
Right.
so.
Right.
My concerns are more like I do the research and look into it, but you know, don't create a golem that's going to come back and kill you. Like,
Well, one of my concerns, because I played around with it a little bit over the past few weeks, is that when you plug in certain queries or prompts,
mm-hmm.
there definitely seems to be a political bias to the answers. So, for example,
Heard that.
I tried to create like an outline for a novel, right? Called Falsehood and Truth. And I asked for like a number of character profiles. It was almost laughable. Maybe every third profile character was some ethnic minority or involved in social justice or was woke or involved in intersectionality. None of their characters were conservative. None of the characters were traditional. The characters were classical liberals. And so to me, that was a very subtle bias bug in the system. So most people aren't going to take the time to rethink the kind of subtle biases they're getting from GPT chat. I think that's kind of a problem. It's kind of nudging you in a certain direction, right?
Well, I mean, I saw some things on that
Yeah.
a couple of years back where they said, well, okay, well, we have to make sure we program the algorithms and everything to be equitable. So this was already coming into. I mean, like you talk about social justice math and garbage like that. So it's
Right,
been
right.
around. Look, it's been awesome talking to you guys, and I could keep going, but I should really, I should really. It's coming up on a couple hours, and I do need to get a few things done. Thank you both so
But
much.
this has
So
been fun.
no,
Yeah,
this has been awesome. I mean, I like I
Yeah.
said, we could talk. I'd love to talk to you guys for hours, and
definitely.
we could do it again a little bit. But if you each have some closing words and thoughts of hope or anything like that, it'd be great.
Oh, good Lord.
And also, I mean, I know Wink, you don't really have a presence, but Jen, if you want to let people know where they can get a hold of you, and
Yes,
also
Jim.
send me any links to ILV where people can donate or anything like that. I'll put it in the
Cool.
show notes.
Awesome. I will do. Yeah. So ILV, you can find us at ilvalues.org or IL Values in Twitter, on Instagram, and the website's ilvalues.org. So that's where, and then for me in
Cool.
particular, I did want to mention our website for our book, or our website for Wink and I, is truthinbetween.com. So when you get into the book, if you want to see original documents, you can access all of our original documents that we talk about in the book at that site. So, and that's where you can find me on social media as Truth in Between.
All right, and also I will put the links to. I'm assuming it's like available on Amazon, all that. So I'll put the link where people can get it, and I'll put the link to your site as well.
I will send it
cool.
to you.
And I do have a Facebook page. It's W.F. Twyman Jr. Writers page, and I occasionally submit posts now and then about the book and other matters. But in closing, I just would say, if you want to make the world a better place, get to know people, one another as individuals, and that'll take you farther than any slogan words or dogma could possibly take you.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you again both very much, and thanks everyone for listening. I'll be back.
Thank you.
Thanks, Obade.